I have a tenuous relationship with virtual reality, which I think is pretty common. For example, I'd really like a new headset. My original Oculus is getting pretty old. The plastic's worn, it doesn't run at a particularly high refresh rate, it's quite low resolution and blurry. It forces you to deep throat Facebook at every opportunity, but I'll go 5-6 months without touching it. Then I'll see something that'll make me want to use it. For example, the Half-Life 2 VR mod that just came out, which is great by the way, and I'll play that. But you know, a month later it's back on the shelf, and you're talking another 3 to 6 months before I'll pick it up. That's not enough use to justify spending £600-700, if not more, on a new headset, controllers, everything else. I have determined that there is a relatively obvious reason for this behavioural pattern. It's not the only reason, but it's the big one. It's not novelty wearing off. It's not motion sickness. I don't get motion sick. It's games. Let me explain. I've owned a VR headset for like 6 years. In that time, I've seen more and more VR games come out at a steady rate. That's the important part. It's been steady at best. It didn't accelerate. In fact, if anything, it's decelerating. It burned its brightest when Half-Life Alyx came out, and you had Valve as the only AAA studio willing to create a full virtual reality only experience at that level of quality. There were two ways things could go after that. Either other AAA studios tried to compete, or they didn't. And they didn't. Take a look at this chart. There's a huge explosion here in 2017. Although in fairness, a lot of this seems to be developers trying to capitalize on the VR bandwagon while there were like 20 games out, when people would buy anything. But then... And, you know, the trend is continuing. We're over 2/3 of the way through this year, and from a purely mathematical standpoint, that means this is going to be the first year since the advent of VR where less than 600 games are released. By the advent of VR, I mean 2016, as that's kind of when it became relevant. I understand quality over quantity, right? I get it, there's a lot of shitty VR games, there's a lot of shitty games in general. You could release 10,000 games and only 5 of them might be good. But as a general rule, there is a ratio of bad to good. And most of the cash grabs, whether asset flips or follow the consumer base that every other development studio does. Which means if there's demand, there are shitty games, but there are also good games, because there's demand. I don't want to get sidetracked here, but just talking about that, it is amazing just how little effort Bethesda has actually put into their virtual reality port. It's almost as if they don't care about their reputation and just wanted to re-release already completed games for a paycheck. This is an issue compounded heavily by the fact that VR is no longer brand new. It's been around for years, and competent developers have proven that games of a high quality are 100% possible. They were possible when VR started, and they're possible now. They're more possible now with engine advancements. So you've got this situation where games that were acceptable to create in 2016 and 2017, which were bare bones at the time but the tech was new, are no longer acceptable. An example is that game that came out when VR was new, where you were like using shields to deflect notes to rhythms or something like that. Completely overshadowed by Beat Saber, which is why I barely remember it. Point being now, if you release any VR rhythm game and it's not nearly as good or as good as Beat Saber, that's it, you're not going to get anywhere, because you can't compete. There aren't enough developers working at the high level like Valve to actually keep up with the expectation of making better games than these kind of small bare bones experiences. And again, there's nothing wrong with little arcadey games and I don't want to say gimmicky experiences, but that's kind of what they are. But VR is not a gimmick anymore. The year of it being a gimmick has passed. Now, if it doesn't take itself seriously, people don't care. People are spending serious money on it. And that leads nicely into what's perhaps the most important part. VR is expensive. The headset's expensive, and frankly with the volume of sales, the games aren't expensive enough. So you've got this weird dichotomy where people are spending a lot of money and developers aren't getting a lot of money and can't get a lot of money, because if you try and sell a VR game for £90, everyone's going to explode, and in fairness, it's a lot. And unfortunately, it's a catch-22, where if people don't invest in VR, there's no consumer base. So companies don't fork out the money to release groundbreaking games. But when there's not groundbreaking games coming out, nobody wants to fork over for VR. It's all good and well saying, oh, there's these 30 great games you can play. People want to pay money for something that will keep getting new games. And it doesn't matter how valid that is. It doesn't matter if, but you're getting your money's worth. You're getting all these games, you're getting this, you're getting that. It doesn't make for good marketing. Saying this is what you will get, and that is all that you will get. Not good marketing. And that's exaggerating because there are good VR games coming out, but it's just lost its hype. And with the way things are, hype is, unfortunately, for better or for worse, a very, very important part of marketing. I mean, I hate this because I love VR. I genuinely think it's great. It's so different. I can actually fucking stand up, put on a headset, grab some motion controllers. And it's really immersive, especially the first few times you use it, it blows you away. But maybe it's time to accept that it's going to stay a niche side interest, both for myself and game developers, for the foreseeable future. Or at least until VR headsets get closer to or under the price point of PSVR. Oh, and just in case anybody asks where I'm getting this from.
My source is I made it the fuck up.